Previously in Roaring Trumpet. Thanks to Harold Shea's use of mead in the eye and Loki's magic spell, Thor recovered his hammer. With might and power, lightning and thunder, Thor slew many of the giants, made mayhem of their gathering, and demolished their stronghold. There were shrieks from the giants and a rush toward the doors. Shea found himself outside and running across the damp moss in the middle of hundreds of galloping giants and thralls. He dared not stop lest he be stepped on. He was caught completely in the panic rush and almost squeezed to death. Fortunately for him, the giants on either side wedged him so tightly he couldn't fall to be trampled. Shea ran downhill with giants still all around him. One of the group just ahead missed his footing and went rolling. Before Shea could stop, he had tripped across the fellow's legs. The giant over whose legs he had fallen was Heimdall, his wig knocked askew to reveal a patch of golden hair. Both were finally captured, bound, and hauled off to Utgard, where the trolls held sway. There they were thrust into a filthy cell under the watchful eyes of two surly, smelly, and uncouth guards, Stegg and Snogg. Several days went by. Harold and Heimdall spent their time fretting and whiling away the time with games of questions and cockroach racing. In one conversation, Heimdall remarked that it was too bad Harold couldn't read the minds, which gave Harold an idea. He had been trained to observe and manipulate minds when in the 20th century, and now thought of a way he might trick Snogg into helping them escape. He had observed that Snogg was extremely sensitive about his humongous nose. With phony magic and the help of their fellow prisoners, Shea would convince Snogg that he had shrunk his nose. Does Harold succeed with his magic? Will he become a warlock at last? We continue now with episode 6. When Snogg came on duty at nightfall, he found the dungeon as usual, except that Shea and Heimdall's cells was noisy with shouts of encouragement to their entries in the great cockroach derby. He went over to the cell to make sure that nothing outside the rules of the prison was going on. Shea met his suspicious glower with a grin.
Hi there, friend Snogg. Yesterday I owed Heimdall 30 million crowns, but today my luck has turned and it's down to 23 million.
What you mean?
Shea explained and went on.
Why don't you get in the game? We'll catch a roach for you. It must be pretty dull with nothing to do all night but listen to the prisoners snore.
Snogg then turned abruptly suspicious again.
You make trick to let other prisoners escape. I zip.
He motioned across his throat again.
Lord Cert, he say.
No, nothing like that. You can make your inspection any time. Shh, there's one now.
One what?
A little of the hostility was leaving Snogg's voice. Shea was creeping toward the wall of his cell. He pounced like a cat and came up with another cockroach in his hand.
What'll his name be?
Snogg thought, his little troll brain trying to grasp the paradox of a friendly prisoner, his eyes moving suspiciously.
I call him Fjorm, after a river that run fast.
That where you are from?
Aye.
It is said, friend Snogg, that Fjorm has the finest fish in all the 9 worlds, and I believe it, for I have seen them.
The troll looked almost pleased.
True word. Me fish there early morning. Oh, me wade. Snap. Up come trout. Bite him. Flop. Flop in face. Me remember big one. Chase into shallow.
You and Oku Thor ought to get together. Fjorm may have the best fish, but he has the biggest fish story in the 9 worlds.
Me know that story. Thor no fisher. He use hook and line. Only trolls know how to fish fair. We use hands, like this.
He bent over the floor, his face fixed in intense concentration, then made a sudden sweeping motion, quick as a rattlesnake's lunge.
Ah, fish. I love him. Come, we race.
The 3 cockroaches were tossed into the center of the circle and scuttled away. Snogg's Fjorm was the first across the line, to the troll's unconcealed delight. They ran race after race, with halts when one of the roaches escaped and another had to be caught. Snogg's entry showed a tendency to win altogether at variance with the law of probability. The troll did not notice and would hardly have grasped the fact that Heimdall was using his piercing glance on his own and Shay's roaches, slowing them up, though Snogg was not allowed to win often enough to rouse his sleeping suspicions. By the time Stegg relieved him in the morning, he was over 20 million crowns ahead. Shay stretched out on the floor to sleep with the consciousness of a job well done. When he awoke, just before Snogg came on duty the next night, he found Heimdall impatient and uneasy, complaining of the delay while Surt's messenger was riding to demand the sword head as ransom. Yet it speedily became obvious that the Snogg campaign could not be hurried.
Don't you ever get homesick for your river Fjorm?
Shay asked when the troll had joined them.
I often like him fish.
Think you'll be going back?
Will not be soon.
Why not?
Snogg squirmed a little.
Lord Surt, him hard master.
Oh, he'd let you go? Is that the only reason?
No. Me like troll girl, Elva Gavu. Hero, here. What I do, talk privacy life with prisoner? Stop it. We race.
Shay recognized this as a good place to stop his questioning, but when Snogg was relieved, he remarked to Heimdall.
That's a rich bit of luck. I can't imagine being in love with a female troll, but he evidently is.
Man from another world, you observe well. His thoughts were near enough his lips for me to read. This troll wife, Elva Gavu, has refused him because of the size of his nose.
Ah, then we really have something. Now, tonight,
When the cockroach races began that night, Heimdall reversed the usual process sufficiently to allow Snogg to lose several races in succession. The long winning streak he later developed was accordingly appreciated, and it was while Snogg was chuckling over his victories, snapping his finger joints, and bouncing in delight that Shay insinuated.
friend Snogg, you have been good to us. Now, if there's something we could do for you, we'd be glad to do it. For instance, we might be able to remove that obstacle that prevents your return to Elva Gavu.
Snogg jumped and glared suspiciously.
Not possible.
Heimdall looked at the ceiling.
Great wonders have been accomplished by prisoners when there is held out to them the hope of release.
Lord Surt, him very bad man when angry.
Snogg's eyes moved restlessly. Heimdall nodded.
Aye, yet Lord Surt's arm is not long enough to reach into the troll country after one who has gone there to stay with his own troll wife.
Snogg cocked his head to one side so that he looked like some large beaked bird.
The hard part is to get beyond Lord Surt's arm. Too much danger.
But if one's face were altogether changed by the removal of a feature, it might be much easier and simpler. one would not be recognized.
Snogg caressed his enormous nose.
Too big. You make fun of me.
Not at all. Back in my own country, a girl once turned me down because my eyes were too close together. Women always have peculiar taste.
That true. You fix nose. I be your man. I do all for you.
I don't want to guarantee too much in advance, but I think I can do something for you. I landed here without all my magic apparatus, though.
All you need, I get.
Snogg was eager to go the whole way now that he had committed himself.
I'll have to think about what I need.
The next day, when Stegg had collected the breakfast bowls, Shay and Heimdall lifted their voices and asked the other prisoners whether they would cooperate in the proposed method of escape. They answered readily enough.
Sure, if 'twon't get us into no trouble.
Aye, but will you try to do something for me too?
But if you can manage it quiet.
Ingvi is a louse.
I turned my thoughts to the concoction of a spell that would sound sufficiently convincing, doing my best to recall Chalmers' description of the laws of magic, to which I had given so little attention when the psychologist stated them. There was the law of contagion. No, there seemed no application for that. But the law of similarity, that would be it. The troll himself, familiar with spells and wizardry, would recognize an effort to apply that principle as in accordance with the general laws of magic. It remained then to surround some application of the law of similarity with sufficient hocus pocus to make Snogg believe something extra special in the way of spells was going on. By their exclamation over the diminishing size of Snogg's nose, the other prisoners would do the rest.
When they were alone, Shay asked Heimdall,
Who should one invoke in working a spell of this kind?
Small is my knowledge of this petty mortal magic. The evil companion would be able to give you all manner of spells and gewgaws. But I would say that the names of the ancestors of wizardry would be not without power in such cases.
And who are they?
There is the ancestor of all witches, by name Witolf, the ancestor of all warlocks, who was called Wilharm. Svarthead was the first of the spell singers, and of the giant kindred Ymir. For good luck and the beguiling of Snogg, you might add two who yet live, Andvari, king of the dwarfs, and the ruler of all trolls, who is the old woman of Ironwood. She is a fearsome creature, but I think not unpleasant to one of her subjects.
when Snogg showed up again, Shay had worked out his method for the phony spell.
I shall need a piece of beeswax and a charcoal brazier already lit and burning. A piece of driftwood sawn into pieces no bigger than your thumb. A pound of green grass and a stand on which you can balance a board just over the brazier.
Time comes very near. Giant's muster. When you want things.
In the background, Shay heard Heimdall's gasp of dismay at the first sentence.
As soon as you can possibly get them.
Maybe tomorrow night. We raised?
No. Yes.
Heimdall's lean, sharp face looked strained in the dim light. Shay could guess the impatience that was gnawing him with his exalted sense of personal duty and responsibility.
And perhaps with reason. The fate of the world of gods and men, in Heimdall's own words, hung on that trumpet blast. My own fate, too, hung on it, an idea I could never contemplate without a sense of shock and unreality, no matter how frequently I repeated the process of reasoning it all out. Yet not even the shock of this repeated thought could stir me from the fatalism into which I had fallen. The world I had come from, uninteresting though it was, had at least been something one could grasp, think over as a whole. Here I felt myself a chip on a tossing ocean of strange and terrible events. My early failures on the trip to Jotunheim had left me with a sense of helplessness, which had not entirely disappeared, even with my success in detecting the illusions in the giants' games and the discovery of Thor's hammer. Loki then, and Heimdall later, had praised my fearlessness. Ha! If they only knew. It was not true courage that animated me, but a feeling that I was involved in a kind of strange and desperate game, in which the only thing that mattered was to play it as skillfully as possible. I suppose soldiers had something of that feeling in battle. Otherwise, they would all run away and there wouldn't be any battle.
His thoughts strayed again to the episode in the hall of Utgard.
Was it Loki's spell or the teardrop in my eye that accounted for my success there, or merely the trained observation of a modern mind? Some of the last, certainly. The others had been too excited to note such discordant details as the fact that Hugi cast no shadow. At the same time, my modern mind balked over the idea that the spell had been effective. Yet there was something, a residue of phenomena not accounted for by physical fact. That meant that, given the proper spell to work, I could perform as good a bit of magic as the next man. Heimdall, Snogg, and Surt all had special powers, built in during construction, as it were. But their methods would do me, Shay, no good at all. I was neither god, troll, nor, thank heaven, giant. Well, if I couldn't be a genuine warlock, I could at least put on a good show. I thought of pose. How would a wizard act? My normal behavior should seem odd enough to Snogg for all practical purposes.
The inevitable night dragged out, and Stegg arrived to take over his duties. Snogg hurried out. Shay managed to choke down what was sardonically described as his breakfast and tried to sleep. The first yell of
Envy is a louse
brought him up all standing, and his flea bite seemed to itch more than usual. He had just gotten himself composed when it was time for dinner again, and Snogg. The troll listened, twitching with impatience till Stegg's footfall died away. Then he scurried out like a magnified rat and returned with his arms full of the articles Shay had ordered. He dumped them in the middle of the passage, and with a few words opened the door of Shay and Heimdall's cell.
Put out all but one of the torches.
While Snogg was doing this, the amateur magician went to work. Holding the beeswax over the brazier, he softened it enough to work and pressed it into a conical shape, making 2 deep indentations on one side, till it was a crude imitation of Snogg's proboscis. Shay whispered to the pop-eyed troll.
Now, get the water bucket. When I tell you, pour it into the brazier.
I knelt before the brazier and blew into it. The coals brightened. I picked up a fistful of the driftwood chips and began feeding them onto the glowing charcoal. They caught little very colored flames dancing across them. I, on my haunches and swaying to and fro, began my spell.
Ritolf and Wilharm, stand, my friends. Advari, Ymir, help me to my ends. The Hag of Ironwood shall be my aid. By the spirit of Svarthead, let this spell be made.
The beeswax on the board above the brazier was softening. Slowly, the cone lost its shape and slumped. Transparent drops trickled over the edge of the board, hung redly in the glow, and dropped with a hiss and a spurt of yellow flame into the brazier. Shay chanted,
Let wizards and warlocks combine and conspire to make Snogg's nose melt like the wax on this fire.
The beeswax had become a mere fist-shaped lump. The trickle into the brazier was continuous. Little flames rose yellowly and were reflected from the eyes of the breathlessly watching prisoners. Shay stuffed handfuls of grass onto the brazier. Thick rolls of smoke filled the dungeon. He moved his arms through the murk, wriggling his fingers and shouting,
Hag of the Ironwood, I invoke you in the name of your subject.
The waxen lump was tiny now. Shay leaned forward into the smoky half-light, his eyes smarting, and rapidly molded it into something resembling the shape of an ordinary nose.
Pour now.
Swoosh went the water into the brazier, and everything was blotted from vision by a cloud of vapor. He struggled away into an erect position. Sweat was making little furrows in the dirt along his skin with the sensation of insects crawling.
All right, you can put the light back on now.
The next few seconds would tell whether his deception was going to work if the other prisoners did not fail him. Snogg was going along the passage, lighting the extinguished torches from the one that remained. As the light increased, and he turned to place one in its bracket on the opposite side of the wall, Shay joined in voluntarily in the cry of astonishment that rose from every prisoner in the cells.
Snogg's nose was no bigger than that of a normal human being. I am a warlock.
And feel funny.
The troll put the last torch in place and turned to Shay, caressing the new nose with a scaly hand.
Very good magic, Harold Warlock.
He danced a couple of steps.
I'll forgive you. You like me now?
Shay stood rooted, trying to absorb events that seemed to have rushed past him. The only sound he could utter was, He felt Heimdall's hand on his shoulder.
Well, and truly was that spell cast. Much profit may we have from it. Yet I should warn you, Warlock, that it is ill to lie to the gods. Why did you tell me at the crossroads of the world that you had no skill in magic?
I guess I'm just naturally modest. I didn't wish to presume before you, sir.
Snogg had gone off into a ludicrous hopping dance around the hall.
Beautiful me, beautiful me.
Shay thought that Snogg, with or without nose, was about the ugliest thing he had ever seen, but there seemed little point in mentioning the fact.
How about getting us out of here now, friend Snogg?
Snogg moderated his delight enough to say,
Will be due. Go your cage now. I come with clothes and weapons.
Shay and Heimdall exchanged glances. It seemed hard to go back into that tiny cell, but they had to trust the troll now. So they went.
Now it remains to be seen whether the scaly fish-eater has betrayed us. If he has,
We might consider what we could do to him if he has.
Shay grinned. His astonishing achievement had boosted his morale to the skies.
little enough could I accomplish in this place of fire magic. But such a warlock as yourself could make his legs sprout into serpents.
Maybe.
I could get used to the idea that I, of all people, could work magic. It was contrary to the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. But then, where I was, the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology had been repealed. I was under the laws of magic. My spell had conformed exactly to those laws, as explained by Dr. Chalmers. This was a world in which those laws were basic. The trick was that I happened to know one of those laws, while the general run of mortals and trolls and gods too didn't know them. Naturally, the spells would seem mysterious to them, just as the changing color of two combined chemicals was mysterious to anyone who didn't know chemistry. If I had only provided myself with a more elaborate knowledge of those laws instead of the useless flashlights, matches, and guns.
A tuneless whistle cut across his thoughts. It was Snogg, still beaming, carrying a great bundle of clothes and something long.
Here, clothes, lords.
He grinned, the tendrils on his head writhing in a manner that could no doubt indicate well-being, but which made Shay's skin crawl.
Here, swords, too. I carry till we outside, yes?
He held up a length of chain.
You put round wrist. I lead you. Anybody stop. I say going to Lord Cert.
Hurry, Harold.
Shay struggled into the unfamiliar garments.
There is yet hope, though it grows dim, that we may reach the other Aesir before they give my sword away.
Shay was dressed. He and Heimdall took the middle and end of the chain, while Snogg tucked the other end in his belt and strode importantly before them, a huge sword in either hand. They were as big as Hundingsbana, but with plain hilts and rust-spotted blades. The troll carried them without visible effort. Snogg opened the door at the end of the dungeon.
Now you keep quiet. I say I take you to Cert. Look down. You much abused.
One of the prisoners called softly.
Good luck go with you, friends, and do not forget us.
Then they were outside, shambling along the gloom of the tunnel. Shay hunched his shoulder forward and assumed as discouraged an expression as he could manage. They passed a recess in the tunnel wall where sat 4 trolls. Their tridents leaned beside them, and they were playing the game of odds and evens with their fingers. One of the 4 got up and called out something in troll language. Snogg responded in the same tongue, adding,
Lord Cert, what?
The troll looked dubious.
One guard not enough. Maybe they get away.
Snogg rattled the chain.
Not this. Spell on this chain. On our sword, Thoma.
The troll seemed satisfied with the explanation and returned to his sport. The 3 stumbled on through the dimness, past a big room hewn out of rock, full of murky light and motion. Shay jumped as someone screamed.
Don't!
There was only a glimpse of what was going on, but enough to turn the stomach. The passage ended in a ledge below which boiled a lake of molten lava. Beside the ledge sat a giant with one of the flaming swords. As he looked up, his eyes were pits beneath the eyebrow ridges.
Prisoners go to Lord Cert. Orders.
The giant peered at them.
Say, ain't you the troll Snug? What happened to your nose?
I pray, old woman of ironwood. She shrink 'em.
Snug grinned.
Okay, I guess it's all right.
As they passed, the giant thrust a foot in front of Shay, who promptly stumbled over it in sickening fear of going down into the lava. The giant thundered.
Ha ha ha!
You be careful. You push prisoners in. Sir push you in by yammer.
Ha ha ha! You go on, scary face, before I push you in.
Shay picked himself up, giving the giant a look that should have melted lead at 20 paces.
If I could remember that face and sometime, but no, I was romancing. Careful, Shay. Don't let things go to your head.
They turned from the ledge into another tunnel. This sloped up, then leveled again, where side tunnels branched in from several directions. Snogg picked his way unerringly through the maze. A tremendous banging grew on them, and they were passing the entrance of some kind of armory. The limits of the place were invisible in the flickering red glare, through which scuttled naked black things like licorice dolls.
These would be the dark dwarves from Svartalheim, where no man nor ace has ever been.
They went on, up, right, left. A sultry glow came down the tunnel ahead, as though a locomotive were approaching around the curve. There was a tramp of giant feet. Around the corner came a file of the monsters, each with a flaming sword, marching and looking straight ahead like somnambulists. The three flattened themselves against the wall as the file tramped past, their stench filling the passage. The rearmost giant fell out and turned back.
Prisoners to Lord Sir.
The giant nodded. Shay got it in the neck. He retched slightly and swabbed it with the tail of his cloak as the giant grinned and hurried after the rest. They were in the upper part of the stronghold now, moving through forests of pillars. Snogg abandoned his bold stride, put a finger to his lips, and began to slide softly from pillar to pillar. The tread of a giant resounded somewhere near. All three squeezed themselves into a triangle of shadow behind a pillar. The footsteps waxed, stopping just on the opposite side, and all three held their breath. The little splat landed on the floor. Footsteps moved off.
Give me chain.
He rolled it into a tight ball and led the way, tiptoeing into another maze of passages.
This is way.
They stood silently for a few minutes.
We wait till passage clear. Then I go. Make giant chase. Then you go. Run fast. Then light out on floor, quick.
They fell flat at the word next to the wall. Shay felt the floor vibrate beneath him to the tread of invisible giants. They were coming nearer, toward them, right over them, and the sound of their feet was almost drowned for Shay in the beating of his own heart. He shut his eyes. One of the giants rumbled heavily.
So, I says to him, "What's the matter? Ain't you got no guts?" And he says,
The rest of the remark was carried away. The three rose and tiptoed. Snogg motioned them to stop, peering around a corner. Shay recognized the passage by which they had entered the place. How long before? Snogg took one more peek, turned, and handed Shay one sword, giving the other to Heimdall.
When giant chase me, run fast. Dark outside. You hide.
How will you find us?
Snogg's grin was visible in the gloom.
Never mind. I find you all right. You bet.
He was gone. Shay and Heimdall waited. They heard a rumbling challenge from the sentry and Snogg's piping reply. A chain clanked, the sound suddenly drowned in a frightful roar.
Whoa, you snotty little...
Feet pounded into the night, and shoutings. Shay and Heimdall raced for the entrance and out past the door, which swung ajar. It was blacker than the inside of a cow, except where dull red glows lit the undersides of smoke plumes from vents in the cones. They headed straight out and away, Shay at least with no knowledge of where they were going. It would be time enough to think of direction later anyway. They had to walk rather than run, even when their eyes had become accustomed to the gloom, and even so narrowly missed a couple of bad falls on the fantastically contorted rock. The huge cone of Surt's stronghold faded into the general blackness behind them. Then there was a hiss in the dark, and they were aware of Snogg's fishy body smell. The troll moved light and sure like a cat. He was
Hit giant in nose with chain. You should see face.
Whither do you lead us, troll?
Where you want to go?
Heimdall thought.
The best would be Sverre's house, the crossroads of the world. Or, failing that, the gates of hell, where one may hope to find, even yet, the wanderer at his task. He must know, soon as ever, what we have seen. That were a fortnight's journey afoot. But if I could get to some high, cold place where this fire magic is not, I could call my horse Goldtop.
Look out! Giants come!
A flickering yellow light was showing across the lava beds. Snogg vanished into a patch of shadow, while Shay and Heimdall crouched under the edge of a dike in the lava flow. They heard the crunch of giant feet on the basalt. The shadows swayed this way and that with the swinging of the fiery swords. A giant voice rumbled.
Hey, you, this is a rough section. There's enough pockets to hide 50 prisoners.
Okay. I suppose we gotta poke around here all night. I don't think they came this way anyhow.
You ain't supposed to think. Hey, ride.
Here!
Don't get too far away.
But the other guys are clear out of sight.
That don't matter none. We gotta keep close together. Ouch!
The last was a yell mixed with a thump and a scramble.
If I catch those scum, they'll pay for this.
The light from the nearest giant's sword grew stronger, creeping toward Shay and Heimdall, inch by inch. The fugitives pressed themselves against the rock at their backs, as if they could push themselves right through it, inch by inch. The giant was clearly visible around the end of the lava dike, holding his sword high and moving slowly, peering into every hollow. Nearer came the light. Nearer. It washed over the toes of Shay's boots. Then it lit up Heimdall's yellow mane.
Hey! Rocky! Ranver! I got him! Come quick!
He rushed at a run. At the same time, there was a thumping behind them, and the nearest of the other two leaped up out of nowhere, swinging his sword in circles.
Take that one, Warlock.
Heimdall pointed with his sword at the first of the two. He vaulted lightly to the top of the dike and made for the second giant. Shay hefted his huge blade with both hands.
You simply couldn't fence with a crowbar like this. It was hopeless. But I wasn't afraid. Hot dog, I wasn't afraid. What the hell anyway?
The giant gave a roar and a leap, whirling the fiery sword over his head in a figure 8 to cut the little man down in one stroke. Shay swung the ponderous weapon up in an effort to parry that downstroke. He never knew how, but in that instant the sword went as light as an amusement park cane. The blades met. With a tearing scream of metal, Shay's sword sheared right through the flaming blade. The tip sailed over his head, landing with a crackle of flames and some brush behind. Almost without Shay's trying, The big blade swept around in a perfect stop, thrust, and cart and through the monster's throat. With a bubbling shriek, the giant crashed to earth. Shay spun around. Beyond the lip of the dike, Heimdall was hotly engaged with his big adversary, their blades flickering. But the third giant was coming up to take a part. Shay scrambled up on the dike and ran toward him, surprised to discover he was shouting at the top of his voice. The giant changed course and in no time was towering right over him. Shay easily caught the first slash with a simple parry cart. The giant hesitated, irresolute. Shay saw his chance, whipped both blades around in a blind octave and lunged. The giant's flaming sword was pushed back against its owner, and Shay's point took him in the stomach with such a rush that Shay almost fell into the collapsing monster's body. End of episode 6.